All right, well,
And
hello again. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you today about the community rating system. My name is Todd Tucker. I'm with FEMA Region VII here in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm the Federal Flood Risk Management Standard Lead, as well as the Community Rating System Coordinator for the region. And our region consists of Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. Now, CRS is a voluntary program that recognizes, encourages, and incentivizes community floodplain management practices that exceed the minimum requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. Through the CRS, the best of the best in protecting community constituents from flooding are rewarded and for implementation of mitigation efforts that address three main goals. That's reduce and avoid flood damage to insurable property, strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program, foster comprehensive floodplain management, and as a result, flood insurance premium rates are discounted in your community to reflect the reduced flood risk for the insured who reside in that CRS community. So it's an opportunity to not only benefit communities and constituents for implementing best practices, but reduce the cost of flood insurance. Now, Congress established the Community Rating System in 1990 as a program to recognize and reward community floodplain management activities that, again, exceed the minimum NFIP standards. Any community that is fully compliant with the National Flood Insurance Program may apply voluntarily to join the Community Rating System. Now, loss avoidance studies have been conducted after disasters in our region and in neighboring states. These studies show how acquisition, building modification, and higher regulatory standards, such as those that receive credit through the community rating system, protect people and property from hazards and save the cost of recovery. While I don't have a study completed for Nebraska specifically, I have other examples to illustrate real savings through locally implemented hazard mitigation actions, such as Eastern Missouri, where flood acquisition, which cost about $44 million, saved about $93 million in losses avoided in a subsequent disaster event. Similarly, in Iowa, acquisition, relocation, and elevation cost about $24 million. And about a year or so later, there was another flood event and it saved about $24.3 million in losses avoided. In Eastern Colorado, various higher regulatory standards and flood control projects cost about $5.6 million and saved $22 million in losses avoided in a flood event that occurred there a few years ago. Now, in terms of loss avoidance, the overall hazard benefit cost ratio is 4-to-1 for implementation of higher standards and above code design requirements, and 6-to-1 for federally funded projects. I'd like to note that regarding riverine flooding, like that we have here in the Midwest, the benefit increases to $7 saved for every dollar spent on hazard mitigation. So there's a significant savings in terms of recovery cost for every dollar that's spent on hazard avoidance. Now, earlier we talked a little bit about creditable activities. This table here indicates kind of a quick summary of the opportunities you have through the community rating system, which is kind of a cafeteria plan to secure credits that help you reduce the cost of flood insurance in your community. Gene will talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. I'd like to suffice it to say that under the CRS program, there are 4 series of activities detailed in the coordinator's manual that includes public information, mapping and regulations, flood damage reduction and higher standards, warning and response. And within the warning and response, there are 19 activities and 94 subsequent elements, all of which can provide CRS credits to your community. Implementation of these various elements result in cumulative points awarded and ultimately reflect the flood insurance discount that communities insured are eligible to receive as a reward or incentive to CRS participation and advanced flood hazard mitigation. So CRS really is an incentive program rewarding communities for implementing best practices in hazard mitigation. And there's a direct benefit to your constituents in your community. Now, these activities and elements are detailed in the 2017 CRS Coordinator's Manual as amended. In the 2021 addendum to the 2017 CRS Coordinator's Manual, there are 2 prerequisites for entry and advancement in the community rating system. A prerequisite to enter as a Class 9 is construction certificates, formerly known as maybe elevation certificates, where you have to determine the elevation of the structure, document that, and maintain those records so we can review those annually. ISO, Gene and staff that work with Gene come to the community annually, look at those elevation certificates that have been issued for structures in the special flood hazard area, and assess the accuracy of those construction certificates. Community is required to maintain a 90% accuracy, and there's a lot of training available to help assist with that. And there's 2 opportunities to ensure that the community is maintaining that minimum standard for maintaining a Class 9 in the community rating system. There's also a prerequisite for a Class 8 or better, and that's a freeboard requirement. That's 1 foot of freeboard above the base flood elevation. Coincidentally, the state of Nebraska has a foot of freeboard required, so most of you are probably implementing that already, and there's potential CRS credits for that as well. As I talked about, a lot of our states encourage, or in some cases have adopted, various higher standards, which can lead to CRS credits in your community. So what does that mean for Nebraska communities that are interested in joining the community rating system? There is the potential to enter the CRS credits from activities that your community is likely already implementing in accordance with state law and local best practices. For example, Nebraska, I already mentioned the freeboard requirement, but there's also the no new residential structures in the floodway, which provides the opportunity for CRS credits as well. Now here on this slide, there are 2 scenarios for the state of Nebraska on how a community might achieve a low maintenance Class 9 into the CRS for a 5% discount on flood insurance premiums within the community. In example A, we see a community with a strong open space ethic and GIS department. In example B, we have a community with a strong stormwater and hazard mitigation plan. Now I'd like to qualify that a little bit. Under the hazard mitigation plan, there are up to 382 credits available. However, the community may only get partial credit unless all of the 10 steps that are required through CRS have been completed and followed and documented. For example, to receive credit for a multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan, the community must send at least 2 representatives to the planning committee and have at least half of the representatives attend all of the committee meetings, in addition to having documentation verifying completion of the other steps required for CRS credit. Now, hazard mitigation plans are updated once every 5 years. There may be a couple of interim meetings, and typically that may increase, prior to the 5-year cycle update. So it shouldn't be too onerous to sit in those meetings during that time, but it does require that people attend meetings, document their attendance, and maintain that documentation for that CRS credit. Another opportunity for credit I'd like to highlight is under the Substantial Damage Management Plan. That's activity 512D. There's the opportunity for up to 140 points for your CRS credits there, because every 500 points results in another opportunity for class advancement and an additional 5% discount on your flood insurance rate. To achieve the maximum amount of points under your Substantial Damage Management Plan, a community would need to develop the plan, use FEMA's Substantial Damage Estimator, which is a program that you can pre-populate with the communities that are in the special flood hazard area and identify potential impacts through that for estimating your substantial damage should an event occur, and consider pre-event mitigation alternatives. Once you've documented that in your plan, you can forward it to review to ISO and the region, and once approved, credits could be available for that. Now, both the examples on the screen accumulated credits meeting the 500-point baseline for a CRS Class 9 or entry into the community rating system, and that 5% discount to flood insurance rates. A combination of these credits could lead to a Class 8 and a 10% discount to flood insurance, further reducing the risk to flood-prone structures in the community. There are annual verification requirements, as I've mentioned, that include annual review of construction certificates under Activity 310, and annual outreach projects need to have verification as well as a progress report for the mitigation plan, as we discussed. But with that documentation, it shouldn't be too difficult to maintain either a Class 9 or a Class 8 for up to 10% discount on flood insurance rates. Now, what's required to join the community rating system? We have to be in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program. You have to submit a letter of interest to the state and regional staff, and once received, FEMA staff will coordinate good standing with the state and the local community in some cases may require a call or maybe a visit and a quick tour of the floodplain, maybe looking over some documentation in the community to verify that you're in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program minimum requirements. Once that good standing has been verified, we would forward that information over to ISO, Gene, and staff, and they would proceed with the Community Coordination CRS entry classification assessment. And you have to maintain those prerequisites we talked about, like construction certificates. You have to make sure they're correct. You might have to update your ordinance for CRS Class 8 so that you ensure that the freeboard is being applied to mechanical, electrical, and the AO zone if there's any in your community. And you also have to complete the ISO annual reviews for construction certificates, as I mentioned. And there'll be like a 5-year cycle visit where they go through in detail and look at how the community is progressing through CRS. It is a bit of documentation, but if you're reasonably organized, it shouldn't be that difficult to maintain that documentation for the annual review or the 5-year cycle visit. So in summary, there are multiple benefits to joining the CRS program, or even just adopting higher standards at the local community level to protect people and property from the flood hazard. Losses avoided through implementation of higher standards and best practices protect people's lives, property, and livelihood, and minimize the disruption of services within your community. They maintain your economy. Based on accumulation of CRS activities or mitigation actions, businesses and residents within CRS communities receive discounts for the federally backed flood insurance. This discount can range from 5% for a CRS Class 9 to 45% for a CRS Class 1. This premium reduction is a savings or money that can remain in your community instead of being spent on flood insurance. In addition, through public information activities, the community constituents are reminded that the community is working to protect them from flood losses, building local support and improving flood protection measures. There are plenty of potential CRS credits available through activities that the community likely has already implemented. In addition, participating in the Hazard Mitigation Plan update is one activity that may provide significant CRS credits. Developing a substantial damage plan is another area that would benefit and provide CRS credits. The required steps to receive CRS credit may be found in the 2017 CRS Coordinators Manual and the 2021 Addendum to the Coordinators Manual.
So my name is Gene Kohls. I'm the CRS specialist for Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. Started with ISO back in 2014. As you can see from my area code, it's 305. Where's 305? 305 is Florida. So that's where I was at when I was hired. I went to New England. I was the resource special or the CRS field specialist up there for 7 years. Currently, I live in Parker, Colorado. And I am, like I said, covering the states mentioned. And there's my contact information, phone number, my email address, and then a couple of the CRS resources, which Adele already provided, and then the FEMA.gov website, which we'll look at that here in a little bit as well. So this is basically just a light introduction. We're going to go through some of the same things that actually Todd went through, very similar slides. So I'm sure if you got the slide decks, you're like, some of these things look familiar. So yeah, I mean, we're trying to get information out there to you folks so you can make some decisions on whether you would like to participate or not. And then of course, we'll talk about Class 9, 5% discount, and then the resources. These are the goals. These goals have been a part of the CRS program for quite a while. Reducing and avoid flood damage, strengthen and support insurance, and overall fostering good floodplain management. So this is the FEMA.gov community rating system website. If you got that link, you can go in there and take a look at that. So we also have the CRSresources.org website. They wanted to move everything over to this website to make a little more concise location where everything's at. CRSresources.org is still available. I anticipate at some point they're going to move everything over to this site. So if you have both those sites bookmarked, that'd be great. You can go on to that site. You can download the 2017 Coordinators Manual and the 2021 Addendum. Both of them are on there. And then there's some frequently asked questions about the addendum. And as Todd mentioned, he had his slide had a little more detail about the individual activities within CRS. This is a basic rundown of the series of activities: 300, 400, 500, and 600. Sorry about that. 300 is public information. You have your outreach, your websites, things like that. 400 series is mainly mapping and regulations, also open space. And open space is one of those activities that I would recommend anybody that's trying to join the program take a look at. There's a lot of points available for open space credit. So if you have open space in the special flood hazard area, I would definitely look at those, right off the bat. I have communities, let's see, 1 or 2 communities that were already a class just based on the amount of open space they had. I think the highest I've seen is 83%, which is super high. That's a lot of open space, designated as open space in the floodplain. So that's good. The more open space that you have in the SFHA, the better off you're going to be. Also in the 400 series, I mentioned that there's also a multiplier. It's called the county growth adjustment. So depending on the year that you have your visit, everything in the 400 series is multiplied by that number to get your overall score. And then the 500 series is planning, which Todd talked about. There's also the repetitive loss. That's where the 500 is found in the 500 series as well. Those are the 2 main activities. 540 isn't as popular as some of those other activities within or elements within that activity, but it's definitely something to look at. And the 600 series is a very intense activity. All right, so the 2021 addendum in the program prerequisites, we ran through those a little bit with Todd's slides. These are all the ones that you really need to pay attention to. Obviously, be in good standing with the NFIP, 310 EC requirements and the rep loss requirements, and then the prerequisites. And we'll go through some of these in these other slides. This is just the cover pages for the coordinator's manual and the addendum. The addendum really, it exists with the coordinator's manual. There were some additions in the addendum, like activity 370. There's some additions in there. There's also some elements that were sunsetting, like state mandated standard credit that they used to provide. That's sunsetted now, so that's no longer available. So I use them both hand in hand, and be sure to look at both of those. This slide basically goes into a little bit more about that as well. It goes into the addendum, which talks about that. And then here's so the 3 prerequisites. The 310 prerequisite for all the communities. You maintain those elevation certificates, construction certificates, which go into the vent certification, wet flood proofing, dry flood proofing. And then certificates are reviewed every year. You must meet the 90% correctness ratio. Melissa James, she's our resource specialist who goes through and looks at all those construction certificates and make sure that they're correct. So you'll work with her at recertification time. Recertifications are sent out in, I believe it's March for Nebraska, if that sounds right. And then you have until May to get them completed. And then on the other side of this slide, it talks about the repetitive loss prerequisites for the communities. If you're category A, that means you don't have any repetitive loss properties, which is great. Category B is 0 to 50, and then category C is 50 plus. That's where it mentions if you have 50 repetitive loss properties, you have to do everything listed above, plus you have to have a floodplain management plan or a repetitive loss area analysis. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everybody in Nebraska falls in the category B, I think right now. Yeah, so everybody's meeting the annual mailing, the mapping exercise, and then the source of flooding. And this goes into a little bit more detail about the prerequisites and what's involved with each class. This is from the coordinator's manual, the 2017 coordinator's manual, which shows the class 9 prerequisites, as we mentioned, and then the class 6 prerequisite. You have to have a BSEG score of 5-5 or better. And then the class 4 prerequisites and the class 1 prerequisites. And right now we have two class 1s across the entire United States, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Roseville, California. And I'm not quite sure on the number of class 4 better. I think it was like 14 or so, somewhere in that area. And then in the 2021 addendum, that's where they added the class 8 prerequisite, that you have to enforce at least 1 foot of freeboard, including machinery or equipment. And plus meeting the class 9 prerequisites. The one thing to note on here too, that we provide regulatory credit for anything that isn't open space credit. And I think I got another slide coming up that we'll kind of go into a little more detail about that. And voila, here it is. So the main thing is, so the one side getting started with the CRS, we've talked about that before. Todd did a good job of mentioning everything there and what you need to do. I usually come into the system there towards the bottom. You'll work with the folks at the state and with FEMA, going through the CAV, doing the letter of good standing. And then once I get that letter of good standing from those folks, then that's when I'll give you a call, send you an email, say, hey, I got this approval letter or letter of good standing. We'll come out and we'll visit your community and go through all the activities that you would like to get credit for. And that's one good thing too, with a quick check. I definitely would like folks to take a look at that quick check. And not only gives you a good idea about what activities that you have readily available or what activities you may want to try to get credit for in the future. And then it also has a place in there where you can do your mapping exercise as far as getting the total acreage of your special flood hazard area. Let's see here. CRS discounts, published twice a year, April 1st and October 1st. So there's just those two opportunities to get the insurance manual updated to show the discounts. We try to do our best to get these files completed in a timely manner so you can get on to the next insurance update. So the sample that I have that I'm providing is a sample class 9 discount. That goes into a little more detail about the 420, 430. I definitely want to talk about that. But of course, your certificates, elevation certificates, you get 30 points. You get the outreach. The state average for Nebraska is 100 points. So, obviously some folks have more, some folks have less. 100's about the average. And I'll provide something else here at the end. And I also think maybe we're going to follow up with maybe an additional email. So I do have some resources I'd definitely like to share that may help folks as well. Let's see. Open space, I showed 25% of the SFHA as open space would give you 363 points. We have a thing called an impact adjustment. So whatever you get for open space credit, the remaining percentage of that credit is applied toward freeboard. So that's why I have 75 points there. If 1 foot of freeboard by itself is worth 100 points, but we tie in that impact adjustment and we reduce that by 25%, since obviously you shouldn't be building in the open space area. So that's how that works. And then the building codes, 48 points for that. The additional map data state average is 127 points, but that ranges to, there's different ways to get, credit there, depending if you have your old firms or whether if you have benchmarks and things like that. And then of course, repetitive loss is required, but there's no points directly provided for repetitive loss. You will get credit for your outreach to the repetitive loss areas in activity 330. So just because it says there that you don't get points, you can still get points in other locations. Of course, if you do a rep loss area analysis, you'll get credit for points in of the 500 series. And so that, my example there comes with 751 points. That's kind of a mid-tier. Class 9, 500 points, of course, is the minimum for class 9. Then 1,000 is when you start getting to class 8. It's every 500 for every class. So this slide shows the CRS resources website. There are some really good training and videos on this site. There's standalone for elevation certificates, for recertification, activity 610. They're adding things in there every once in a while. I definitely would, take a look at those. They're 1 hour. They're free. They have the people that are reviewing those items, like tech review folks, they'll go through and look at those, and they usually are the ones that are doing the presentations. And there's a little bit of a closer view of that. They're usually twice a month, sometimes depending on the availability. To be honest, I haven't looked lately to see what training they have available, but definitely go in there and take a look at that. And there's my contact information again. I do the new applications, I do modifications, the 3-5-year verification visits, training, and then conferences. And then below is the resource specialist for Nebraska, Melissa James, and she does the annual recertification and construction certificate reviews. And I think that's it.
Okay, and I'll start on some description of resources or points that are pretty easy to get here in Nebraska by virtue of activities that our Department of Natural Resources does on a daily basis. And just to step back a bit, flooding is a growing hazard in Nebraska. It's not going to go away. So it makes sense for us to be building these robust floodplain management programs and limiting development in our flood hazard areas. We know from the get-go that somebody with a 30-year mortgage has a better than 1 in 4 chance of experiencing flooding during the life of that mortgage. We also know that data is showing that our storms are increasing in frequency, they're increasing in scale and intensity, and they're also decreasing in predictability. Between 1958 and 2012, its study has shown that we've already experienced a 16% increase in precipitation, and that trend is only increasing. And in Nebraska specifically, our springs are getting wetter, our summers are getting drier, but our winters and springs are predicted to be wetter. And so our already existing window of greatest flood risk is only going to increase. Why we should take action? We get benefits from protecting against development in our flood hazard areas. We have reduced costs of flood insurance. We safeguard lives. We safeguard property. We also bump up that quality of life. When we've got open spaces and parks, those are recreational areas for our residents to enjoy. And it also helps us bounce back from disasters that we experience. Where does CRS fit in the state? It might help you to think of it as a cake. The base layer is those Nebraska revised statutes. That's our state minimum standards for floodplain management. Those are applicable across the state. And then communities that participate in the NFIP, they've got that other tier of regulations. If your community has adopted higher standards, there's a couple that are already baked in by virtue of our state's revised statutes, our minimum standards, such as the 1 foot freeboard. But your community may have higher standards. You may have a substantial damage threshold that is 40% rather than 50%, or you may have a higher freeboard. We do have communities that have adopted these higher standards. And then CRS is an additional component of your floodplain management program. You're already doing these base layers. This top tier of the cake is your CRS program, which garners rewards for your community through activities that you're already doing. So just to review some easy points that are available in Nebraska and resources that we have here in the state, through that the 370 section, we've got a bunch of outreach materials on our flood insurance page. You don't have to generate this material from scratch. There's outreach and educational information to be had through FEMA's website and through our own. We'll help you locate that information. You just have to distribute it. You don't have to create anything from scratch. For activity 410, you might be eligible for a new study credit by virtue of the base flood elevation determinations that our office does for you. We also have many ongoing flood hazard mapping projects throughout the state. Your community might be in one of those project areas and again, have access to some points. With the open space preservation, we can help you identify how many acres you have in open space. We can help you identify how many acres of low density zoning that you have. We understand that communities may not have GIS capability in-house, but we can run those analyses for you and quite quickly and for free. So just let us know what you'd like assistance with, and we will get that information for you. Please, of course, give us adequate time to do this for you. We're not going to be able to do it last minute. You know, if you've got a deadline in a few days, this is not something we're going to be able to crank out. But if you give us some adequate lead time, we're happy and thrilled to provide this assistance to you. Whatever we can do to help you get into the CRS program, we're happy to work with you on it. With regards to higher regulatory standards, again, already baked into your local ordinances, you're going to have restrictions on floodway development. You've got limitations on storage in flood hazard areas. You've got a freeboard requirement of 1 foot. Now make sure that it's enforceable, especially the elevation of the mechanical and utility components. Make sure that that's enforceable by virtue of your ordinance. If the wording's not quite right, we can help you make those minor changes to ensure that you get credit. The state also has adopted across the state building codes. So there's a certain amount of points that may be available there to your community just by the fact that the state has adopted for building codes. You simply, again, need to demonstrate the enforcement. With regards to, and I mentioned the freeboard, for 440 flood data maintenance, we have online our floodplain interactive map. We talk about this tool all the time. It's available to you to build into your local website. You can use it in your office to advise folks as to where the flood hazard areas exist in your community. You can use it to print off maps for people who come to your office. It links to base flood elevation determinations. It's got links to flood insurance rate maps, your letters of map change. These are all available through this interface. And so if you utilize it, you don't need to have your own GIS available for your jurisdiction. You can just utilize the state's infrastructure that it's created and build points for it. For floodplain management planning, if you've participated in that local hazard mitigation plan, again, demonstrating that 10-step process and demonstrating that you and another participated in that process, you have access to a whole bunch of points. This is one of the reasons it's so important to be in contact with your local emergency manager. Basically, across the state, we've got local hazard mitigation plans and participation in those plans by our NFIP communities. Now, our local floodplain administrators don't always know that their community is participating in the local hazard mitigation plan process. So be in touch with that emergency manager. They're usually working with the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency to go through this planning process and update those plans on a 5-year cycle. If you don't know if if you're participating in the local hazard mitigation plan, ask me. I will let you know if your community is participating. And I will let you know when it is up for updating. And so you can have it on your dashboard or your radar as to something you need to be participating in. It's also very important that given the significance of flood hazards in the state, that you're in that conversation on that local hazard mitigation plan, having appropriate mitigation actions being discussed. On the subject of substantial damage handbooks, again, there's credit available for having a local substantial damage management plan. You'll find the details of this in that 2021 addendum. You just have to have a 6-step process. It's very prescriptive. Follow those 6 steps. You can follow those 6 steps and access our substantial damage handbook, which has substantial damage assessment process already laid out for you. So you don't have to invent the process, just copy that content from our plan, develop your own vulnerability assessment for your community, and develop your own database, and you will be able to access those substantial damage management plan credits. We do offer several substantial damage assessment trainings. We've had in-person workshops, and we also have our 2 trainings online, part 1 and a part 2 on substantial damage. That's available through the DNR's YouTube channel. And within our channel, we have a separate sort of thread or stream. I don't know the YouTube term for this, but we've got a curated series of videos that are just on floodplain management. You can access those anytime. The ones that say substantial damage have it bold on that first screen. What else? Repetitive loss area analysis. Again, this is something that the state is happy to help you with. If you don't know if you've got repetitive loss properties in your community, ask us. We will help you get the data. We will also help you map the data to confirm whether or not those locations are in your jurisdiction. Again, just give us adequate time, and we will help you get that information. Now, again, doing the annual mailers or what have you, that's on you, but we can help you find out where those locations are. And then finally, for Activity 630, we've got a dam safety program here in the state. So you don't have to do anything. You just get the points for what our dam safety program is doing. So these, again, are just, there's a lot of easy credit out there for Nebraska communities. And we would really love to increase the number of CRS communities in our state. So if you're interested in CRS, consider working with another jurisdiction to get into the program. If contact us or contact ISO, Gene's here representing ISO today. Just let us know that you're interested. We'll help you get that LOI composed and submitted. We'll consider and we'll evaluate your standing in the NFIP. We'll look into whether we've had a community assistance visit or a community assistance contact with you recently, and make sure that you're on good footing to pursue the CRS program as well. We want this to be just it shouldn't be anything too onerous. We just want you to get your foot in the door, and we'll do whatever we can to help you with that. And then also, if you're interested, we have a free 2-day workshop coming up just in a few weeks here on May 17th and 18th. It's going to be here in Lincoln, Nebraska, at our Fallbrook office. It's free. It's going to be again led by ISO. And Asa just shared in the chat the link to the flyer. In the flyer, you can access information about hotels that are available. And also we have a scholarship available that will reimburse you for your travel costs, your meal costs, your hotel costs. Now, there are some criteria that apply, such as distance from the venue. But please do take a look at that. It's a great opportunity that we're able to offer this 2-day workshop.